On January 9, 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto the Macworld conference stage and unveiled a device that basically rewired human behavior to date. At that moment, nobody in that room fully understood what was happening, and some even went ahead to mock it. But that single announcement kick-started a revolution that went ahead to shape how we talk, work, communicate, create, and even live our lives today. And that moment was the birth of the iPhone. Since then, we've watched iPhones come and go. Some changed the world and some, they didn't. You know what? Let's go through the history of the iPhone. The original iPhone and the iPhone 3G were legendary. They weren't perfect, but they redefined the modern smartphone and kickstarted the industry we know today. The iPhone 3GS and the iPhone 4 cemented that legacy, adding the much needed speed and also the iconic Retina display we still enjoy on our iPhones today. The 4S gave us Siri and a camera that was a killer at this time. So I think we'll give it a solid tier for now. Then we have the almighty iPhone 5, which was actually a masterpiece of a design because this device was super thin, light, and a real evolution of masterpiece at this time. So let's give it a legendary rating with no questions at all, Charlie. But as you all know, the iPhone 5 era also gave us our first controversial pick in Apple's lineup, which was the iPhone 5C. Many people called this device a flop because it didn't even meet Apple's own expectations when it comes to sales numbers. And yep, I know a lot of people argue this phone sold tens of millions of copies. Yes, that's true, but let's also remember it also came in a plastic shell, not the regular aluminum or titanium body Apple uses for these devices, which is quite disappointing. The plastic finish, that's the plastic shell it came in, made this phone feel a little bit less premium. So it didn't have the original Apple kind of feeling every Apple iPhone has ever had. So let's give this phone an overrated tier because it truly was, Charlie. But everything took a different turn when it got to the iPhone 5S because this phone actually introduced the iconic Touch ID and also went ahead to introduce the 64-bit processor, which laid the foundation for the Apple ecosystem for years to come. And then we have the iPhone 6, and this is where things really get heated because these devices sold like crazy, and it also brought along a very major redesign, which also went controversial because it introduced the Bendgate kind of propaganda that came on because these phones had the ability to behave like Avatar. They could bend, and Apple themselves knew these phones could actually do that. In fact, Apple's own court documents proved that the iPhone 6 was 3.3 times more likely to bend compared to the iPhone 5S, but it still went ahead to drop it anyway. Interestingly, it was in that same proceeding that it was discovered that the iPhone 6 Plus, which was released along the 6, was a staggering 7.2 times more likely to bend compared to the iPhone 5S. And for that reason, let's rank this phone as a cooked phone because who would want a phone that could actually... With all the lessons learned from the flops of the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, Apple went on a hard course correction with the iPhone 6s where they used a stronger aluminum body and also 3D touch to make this device get a solid tier rank on this list. Next up on the list is this phone, the iPhone 7. This phone actually gave us water resistance and a much better camera, but it also came with a trade-off, and that was it killed the headphone jack. But the real star of this lineup, which personally for me is my best and the most legendary iPhone, is the iPhone 7, because this phone brought Apple's first ever dual camera setup on a device. The interesting part is it later went on to enable portrait compatibility with just a software update. So with just that alone being said, this makes this phone a game changer in Apple's legacy. The iPhone 8 and 8 Plus were fine, adding wireless charging because of the back glass they brought along. But these phones also felt like a rerun of an older model, which was the iPhone 7, and even dating back to the iPhone 6s and 6 Plus, so it wasn't much of a change. So let's give it a solid tier. Moving away from that lineage of iPhones, let's look at the boss himself that laid the foundation for the modern iPhone appearance we've been seeing over the past few years, the iPhone X. This phone did a lot of things we never saw coming, like killing the home button, bringing the new screen with the OLED display and the notch at the top, like just name it. This phone, we can say, is legendary. That same lineup of devices went ahead to give us the iPhone XS, which was a nice refinement. And the legend in that category, the biggest legend in that category actually is the iPhone XR, which is one of the most hated and the most loved iPhones at the same time because it brought every feature of the new generation iPhone into a lower price tier for us. So that is a legendary lineup. The iPhone 11 series was an easy game changer. It had a very massive battery jump and also finally added night mode, which would say put Apple's camera system on par or even ahead of the competition at the time of this phone's release. With that being said, I would say the standard iPhone 11 is one of the greatest iPhones ever made, if not the greatest. But I can't say the same for the iPhone 12 though, because this phone is simply overrated. Yes, the flat-end design of the iPhone 12 was very sleek and beautiful, no competition. But the thing is, the battery life, however, was noticeably poor compared to the battery life of the iPhone 11, and that is why this phone is just overrated. The iPhone 13, however, went on to fix all the problems on the iPhone 12 series and stepped up the game when it comes to battery life because this phone packed an insane amount of battery, and it also went ahead to give us the 120Hz ProMotion display that everyone was waiting for from Apple. Honestly, I would say the iPhone 13 is one iPhone that felt like it had no compromises, and this explains why it's the most popular iPhone unit on the market right now. So let's just say this phone is legendary. The iPhone 14 Pro was a game changer for one simple reason: the dynamic island. You see, Apple took a design compromise and turned it into a very useful feature. At first, people called this feature an overhyped feature because why should a company be hyping the notch that they've created on their own phone? But over time, the usership of this particular feature has grown, and the dynamic island has become one of Apple's most requested features in their new flagship that don't have dynamic island, especially the new iPhone SE series, which Apple calls 16E and 17E, which still came with a notch. The standard iPhone 14, however, will get only a solid rating because this device looked very identical to the iPhone 13 and nothing really changed in the device other than the iPhone 14 Pro itself getting the dynamic island. So yep, that's it for that. The iPhone 15 series will get just a plain solid rating because the only upgrade on this device from the 14 was the USB-C charging, which wasn't an Apple innovation of a thing because USB-C on iPhones was a policy by the EU. And also, USB-C had been around for years before Apple finally decided to bring it onto their device to market it as if it was a revolutionary thing they've done. So let's just leave it at that. And that brings us to the new phones. The iPhone 16 Pro stepped things up with an improved 48 megapixel ultra-wide camera, an A19 Pro chip in it, making processing power very efficient, and also it brought a 5x telephoto zoom to both Pro models and came along with Wi-Fi 7, so this isn't a bad phone. Let's give it a solid rating. But the real shakeup came with the iPhone 17 lineup. Apple finally decided to replace the Plus models with the ultra-thin iPhone 17 Air, which funny enough, they also discontinued a few months after announcing the device and releasing it onto the market. More importantly, the standard iPhone 17 got the 120Hz ProMotion display, which Apple previously only reserved for Pro models. And with all this being said, on the iPhone 17 and more to be searched, I think this phone is simply a legendary tier because nothing can compare to it. And even to take that further, I think this could be the greatest iPhone Apple has ever made. If we put aside the controversies that came along with the liquid ass thing that happened, but let's wait to see what the 18 has to offer because there are rumors coming out that Apple might bring out a foldable phone finally. And it will be interesting to see what they have in their pockets for us though. So there you have it. From the legendary iPhone X to the cooked iPhone 6 series to the game-changing iPhone 7 Plus, every iPhone has had its flaws, its highs, and its turning points. And more importantly, every iPhone has its own place cemented in history. And yep, this is my list on every iPhone ever made, and I'm curious to know what your list will be. What do you think is the most overrated, the most underrated, the most cooked, and the best iPhone ever made? Drop that for me in the comment section because I'll be reading and replying to every comment you drop on this video regarding the iPhone rankings. However, if you are thinking or planning of buying any used iPhone anytime soon, you might want to check this video I did about the used iPhone market so you know your way in to be able to buy smart and buy what will serve you right. Go check out that video and see you in the next one. Peace, Charlie.